Imagine a place larger than Germany, where the mountains seem to touch the sky and the prairies stretch into an endless horizon, but with hardly any inhabitants. This is Montana in 2025, a place of breathtaking beauty where solitude weighs as heavily as the snow. So why does almost no one stay? To understand, let's explore 8 key reasons that explain this paradox: a large land, a tiny population. 8. Freezing temperatures and relentless snow, the winter that never ends. Imagine waking up each morning with frozen eyelashes, your breath rising in sharp white clouds, and your driveway buried under layers of ice that resist even the most determined shoveling. This is the reality for residents of eastern Montana. In towns such as Glasgow, Havre, or Plentywood, winter temperatures routinely drop below -40 degrees Fahrenheit, equivalent to -40 degrees Celsius, with occasional plunges nearing -50 degrees Celsius. These extreme lows are not seasonal anomalies or rare events. They are a consistent, predictable feature of life, returning every year like the inevitability of the holiday season. Snowfall adds to the relentless conditions. Red Lodge, for example, averages nearly 200 inches annually, which is roughly equivalent to stacking 3 adult NBA players and still needing a ladder to reach the top. Even Montana's larger cities, such as Missoula and Bozeman, endure between 80 and 100 inches per season, blanketing streets, homes, and farmlands alike. Blizzards exacerbate the challenges. In Livingston, gusts can exceed 70 miles per hour, powerful enough to push an adult and their dog across a block. These storms transform ordinary tasks into survival exercises. Roads become treacherous skating rinks, power lines fail, and commuting or running errands can take hours, if not days, under hazardous conditions. Heating costs soar during prolonged cold spells. Even modest homes often demand upwards of $3,000 per winter just to remain habitable. For families unprepared for such extremes, winter in Montana is far from the picturesque imagery often portrayed in travel magazines. The romance of snow-covered mountains cannot compensate for the daily demands of survival, where insulated clothing, winter tires, backup generators, and unwavering resolve are essential, not optional. The implications of these harsh winters extend beyond the immediate physical hardships. Societal patterns adjust to accommodate extreme weather. Schools delay openings or close entirely during heavy snowstorms. Businesses shut temporarily, and emergency services often operate under constrained conditions, slowing response times. For newcomers or those unaccustomed to such climates, Montana can feel like a frozen time capsule, a place where the modern conveniences of urban life give way to the raw realities of nature. Living here requires constant preparation, meticulous planning, and an almost obsessive attention to weather forecasts and survival logistics. The romantic notion of the wild frontier, once associated with freedom and adventure, meets the stark reality of endurance. In Montana, surviving winter is a continuous test of resilience, stamina, and foresight, a challenge that few are willing or able to confront year after year. Before we continue, make sure to subscribe and give a like to discover interesting facts to share that few people know about the US states. 7. Expansive territory, sparse population, loneliness by the square mile. Montana stretches across an immense 147,000 square miles, making it larger than the entire Iberian Peninsula, yet it is home to only about 1.1 million people. This translates to roughly 7 inhabitants per square mile, an astonishingly low population density in the context of the United States. For perspective, New Jersey, a much smaller state, supports over 100 people per square mile. The difference is staggering and immediately noticeable in daily life. In Montana, wildlife often outnumbers human neighbors, and winding back roads frequently exceed the number of grocery stores, gas stations, and essential service points. Glasgow, in the northeastern part of the state, has even earned the title of the most isolated town in the continental United States, as designated by National Geographic. The nearest major hospital is almost 5 hours away, a journey comparable to driving from Madrid to Barcelona just for routine shopping. The state's transportation network compounds the challenge of such vast distances. Montana has 7 commercial airports, but only Billings and Bozeman provide reasonably regular connections. Outside these hubs, flights are infrequent, poorly timed, and expensive, with round-trip tickets from smaller towns like Bowman to New York hovering around $600, even if booked months in advance. For residents without a personal vehicle, mobility is severely restricted, effectively turning the state's vast tranquility into involuntary isolation. Travel, errands, or even social visits require careful planning and resilience. Low population density also has significant social implications. Many towns, especially those with fewer than 2,000 residents, lack access to specialized medical care, diverse educational opportunities, cultural institutions, or entertainment venues. Social interaction can be limited, with networking opportunities, professional contacts, and leisure activities often confined to small circles. While some find solace in this solitude, a refuge from the constant bustle and demands of urban life, others experience it as a barrier, an impediment to career growth, personal development, and cultural engagement. The effects of sparse population extend to infrastructure and services. Public transportation is virtually non-existent, broadband connectivity is patchy in rural areas, and emergency services face long response times due to distance and difficult terrain. Schools may consolidate multiple grades into a single classroom, and local businesses must cater to dispersed communities, limiting economic vitality. Ultimately, Montana's vast territory is a double-edged sword. Its openness and untouched landscapes represent freedom and unspoiled beauty, yet the same expanse enforces isolation and logistical complexity. Life here demands independence, resourcefulness, and acceptance of physical and social remoteness. The state's charm is inseparable from its challenges, illustrating why Montana, despite its natural grandeur, struggles to retain a dense or growing population. 6. Economic constraints, limited opportunities, and underemployment. At first glance, Montana's economy appears stable, anchored by traditional industries such as agriculture, livestock, forestry, mining, and tourism. These sectors sustain many local communities and provide employment for a significant portion of the population. However, beneath this apparent stability lies a more nuanced reality. Montana struggles to offer the well-paying, high-skilled jobs that retain young professionals and educated residents. By 2025, the state's gross domestic product barely exceeds $66 billion, accounting for less than 1% of the national total. To put this in perspective, this figure is smaller than the annual revenue of some multinational coffee chains, underscoring the modest scale of Montana's economy in a global context. Unemployment rates, which hover around 3%, suggest a healthy labor market at first glance. Yet these numbers mask a widespread underemployment issue. Many positions are temporary, seasonal, or low-paying, particularly in the tourism and agricultural sectors. Opportunities in technology, finance, research, and other high-skill industries are extremely limited, comprising only about 3% of total employment. By comparison, these sectors account for more than 10% of jobs in states such as California or New York. Consequently, individuals graduating from Montana State University or the University of Montana often relocate to urban centers such as Denver, Seattle, or San Francisco in pursuit of higher salaries and career advancement that their home state cannot provide. The disparity between income and cost of living further exacerbates the challenge. The average annual salary in Montana is roughly $45,000, significantly below the national average, and insufficient to cover the rising costs associated with housing, utilities, and transportation in desirable areas. Even modest homes can command prices that stretch budgets thin, especially when combined with expenses for heating in harsh winters and travel across vast distances. For many residents, financial insecurity is an unavoidable part of everyday life. Healthcare availability is another limiting factor that ties directly to economic viability. Montana has approximately 198 physicians per 100,000 residents, one of the lowest ratios in the United States. Accessing specialized care often requires long drives of several hours to reach hospitals or treatment centers in larger cities. Complex procedures such as cancer treatments, cardiac surgeries, or advanced diagnostic testing involve extensive planning, travel, and significant costs. For residents, these healthcare barriers combine with limited employment opportunities to create a sense of both economic and practical constraint. Montana's economic landscape is defined by limited diversification, low salaries, seasonal employment, and geographic challenges that collectively deter long-term settlement. While the state offers open skies, breathtaking landscapes, and a slower pace of life, these qualities come at the expense of financial security, career growth, and accessible healthcare. For many, the economic realities outweigh the allure of the natural environment, prompting residents to leave in search of opportunities elsewhere. This structural economic limitation explains, more than any other factor, why Montana remains sparsely populated despite its vastness and scenic appeal. 5. High living costs despite rural setting, the price of picture-perfect landscapes. Paradoxically, living in certain corners of Montana can be as costly as residing in major urban centers, despite its rural character and expansive open spaces. businesses. Take Bowman, for example, a town of just over 56,000 residents. By 2025, median home prices in Bowman approached $750,000, surpassing those in Phoenix and edging close to the levels seen in Denver. This surge in real estate values has been fueled largely by telecommuters and remote workers from states such as California, Texas, and Washington. Attracted by Montana's unparalleled scenic vistas, wide-open landscapes, and reputation for tranquility, these newcomers have driven demand far beyond the local supply of homes, inflating property prices dramatically within just a decade. Rental markets have followed a similar trajectory. In Missoula, a one-bedroom apartment now averages $1,600 per month, a striking increase from $900 a decade earlier. When compared to the median household income of approximately $54,000, it becomes evident that housing alone consumes a disproportionately large share of earnings. For lifelong residents, the rising cost of shelter creates pressure not only on personal finances, but also on broader life decisions, including family planning, career mobility, and long-term residency. The financial burden extends beyond housing. Food costs in Montana are roughly 10% higher than the national average, a consequence of transporting goods across vast distances to reach rural communities. Utilities, heating fuel, gasoline, and even basic internet services add further strain. Broadband connectivity, while critical for remote work, online learning, and access to modern services, is often slow, inconsistent, and expensive, limiting opportunities for residents who rely on digital infrastructure to supplement income or education. Energy expenses during Montana's long, harsh winters further exacerbate the financial challenge, with heating bills for even modest homes often reaching several $1,000s each season. This combination of limited local economic opportunities, rising housing costs, and geographically constrained infrastructure produces a unique and paradoxical situation. Montana's natural beauty and spacious environment attract outsiders seeking scenic refuge and the promise of a slower, more idyllic lifestyle. Yet these same attributes contribute to soaring living costs that can overwhelm local incomes. In practical terms, the very qualities that draw new residents simultaneously place long-term locals under financial pressure, effectively pricing many out of the communities they have called home for generations. The economic imbalance also has broader social consequences. As housing and living costs escalate, younger generations are more likely to leave the state in search of affordable living, career growth, and professional opportunities, reinforcing the demographic aging trend and slowing population growth. Meanwhile, telecommuters and wealthier newcomers occupy desirable properties, contributing to a socioeconomic divide between long-term residents and new arrivals. This dynamic underscores one of Montana's defining paradoxes. The allure of picture-perfect landscapes is inseparable from the high cost of inhabiting them, making survival in rural Montana a balancing act between beauty, isolation, and financial sustainability. 4. The Montana Exit Plan, a youth exodus. Each year, Montana experiences a demographic phenomenon that has come to be known informally as the Montana Exit Plan. Roughly 60% of young people who graduate from high school leave the state within 5 years, creating a persistent population imbalance that profoundly shapes local society. The causes are complex and multifaceted: limited access to skilled employment, a scarcity of cultural and recreational opportunities, and rising living costs in desirable areas push young residents to seek opportunities elsewhere. While Montana's landscapes, towering mountains, clear lakes, and wide open plains offer unmatched natural beauty, they cannot compensate for the professional and social infrastructure that young adults often require. Consider a 24-year-old with a degree in computer science, eager to immerse themselves in modern urban life, attending concerts, exploring galleries, participating in nightlife, or networking with peers in their field. Remaining in towns like Miles City, Glendive, or even smaller rural communities seems unappealing. Even culturally vibrant hubs such as Bozeman or Missoula, with their artisanal coffee shops, independent bookstores, and boutique galleries, cannot rival cities like Denver, Seattle, or San Francisco when it comes to career prospects, salaries, and professional growth. Housing costs exacerbate the problem. Rent for a one-bedroom apartment in these towns can exceed $800, while the total number of available jobs statewide rarely surpasses 42,000, leaving young residents with limited options. The exodus has profound and tangible consequences for Montana's communities. With so many young adults leaving, the median age in the state exceeds 40 years, and in some rural counties, it rises above 50. Schools struggle to maintain enrollment, enrollment, often combining multiple age groups into single classrooms or reducing operating days. Hospitals face chronic challenges in recruiting and retaining qualified medical personnel, further straining access to essential services. This creates a self-reinforcing cycle. The lack of opportunities and services drives out youth, and as the population ages, communities become less dynamic, less innovative, and less attractive to newcomers. This demographic shift also shapes the cultural and economic fabric of Montana. Artistic institutions and recreational programs struggle to thrive. Entrepreneurial ventures face labor shortages, and civic engagement often skews toward older priorities, sometimes limiting progressive initiatives or investment in modernization. Families weighing the possibility of long-term settlement face difficult choices. Does the state's tranquility, open space, and natural beauty outweigh the practical challenges of aging, dispersed populations, and limited economic mobility? For many, the answer is no, prompting them to follow in the footsteps of departing youth. In effect, Montana's scenic landscapes coexist with a persistent drain of its youngest and most ambitious residents, reinforcing its sparse population and the perception of isolation. 3. Natural hazards and geographic challenges. Beauty with a price. Montana's landscapes are nothing short of spectacular, from the jagged peaks of the Rocky Mountains to the crystal clear lakes of Glacier National Park and the sweeping prairies of the Eastern Plains. The state offers vistas that attract photographers, hikers, and nature enthusiasts from around the world. Yet behind this striking beauty lies a series of tangible, persistent dangers that profoundly shape daily life for residents. In many communities, grizzly bears roam surprisingly close to homes and roads, posing real threats to humans and livestock alike. Avalanches can occur without warning in mountainous regions, while sudden snowstorms and violent storms can reduce visibility to zero within minutes, turning even short journeys into life-threatening ventures. In the semi-arid regions of eastern Montana, droughts threaten agricultural output, while ranches and farms must invest heavily in irrigation systems to sustain livestock and crops under unforgiving environmental conditions. A significant portion of Montana, over 40%, consists of public lands, including national forests, wildlife reserves, and federally managed territories. While these areas provide unmatched recreational opportunities, they also limit urban and commercial expansion, concentrating populations into scattered towns and restricting infrastructure development. Transportation itself is a major challenge. Only one interstate highway, Highway 190, traverses the state from east to west, and secondary roads are frequently dirt tracks that transform into impassable mud during spring thaws or slippery ice in winter. Villages can remain isolated for days or even weeks when blizzards block the limited access routes, leaving residents cut off from groceries, healthcare, and emergency services that may be located more than 130 kilometers away. Agriculture and industry face equally daunting logistical obstacles. Grain and livestock must travel long distances to reach elevators, rail terminals, or processing facilities, increasing costs, labor requirements, and the risk of delays. Tourism-dependent communities also experience volatility, as seasonal weather extremes can suspend business activity for weeks at a time. Even towns equipped with basic amenities are vulnerable to the unpredictable and often harsh realities of Montana's environment. Long-term residents adapt by embracing a frontier-style mindset. Emergency supplies, specialized vehicles, snow removal equipment, and contingency plans for power outages or blocked roads become part of everyday life. For newcomers accustomed to urban convenience, these precautions may seem extreme, if not overwhelming, reinforcing the perception that Montana, despite its natural grandeur, is inhospitable for ordinary life. Here, beauty comes with a tangible price. Every aspect of daily existence, from commuting and commerce to agriculture and recreation, is influenced by the state's rugged terrain, volatile weather, and embedded natural hazards, demanding resilience, ingenuity, and an acceptance of uncertainty as a constant companion. 2. Infrastructure deficits, roads, healthcare, and connectivity. Delivering essential services such as hospitals, schools, and broadband across Montana's vast and sparsely populated territory is a logistical challenge few states face at this scale. Residents frequently travel between 45 minutes and 2 hours to access basic medical services, including picking up prescriptions, visiting primary care providers, or obtaining routine diagnostic tests. The state ranks among the lowest in the nation for physicians per capita, which translates into lengthy waiting lists, delayed treatments, and increased health risks, particularly for residents with urgent or chronic medical needs. Specialized procedures such as surgeries or cancer treatments often necessitate multi-hour drives to the nearest urban center, making healthcare not only a logistical hurdle, but also also a financial and emotional strain. Education infrastructure faces similar limitations. Rural school districts frequently adopt 4-day school weeks due to insufficient staffing, while students from multiple grade levels often share a single building. These conditions reduce access to specialized programs, extracurricular activities, and peer interaction, impeding academic development and social growth. For high school graduates seeking advanced learning or professional preparation, the scarcity of educational resources becomes a compelling reason to leave the state. The dispersion of educational facilities also complicates transportation, requiring families to invest considerable time and resources in commuting. Connectivity presents another critical challenge. Approximately 1/4 of Montana's population lacks reliable broadband, hampering online education, remote work, and access to digital services. Even routine internet tasks, streaming media, video conferencing, or conducting job searches can become frustratingly difficult. Telecommuters and students reliant on digital platforms face limitations that restrict professional growth, social engagement, and learning opportunities, placing Montana at a disadvantage in an increasingly digital economy. Basic infrastructure such as water systems also suffers from the effects of remoteness. Deep wells, aging pipelines, and sparsely distributed utilities demand constant maintenance, raising costs for communities and households alike. The combination of geographic dispersion, limited public services, and challenging terrain reinforces a pervasive sense of isolation. Residents must plan carefully for daily life. Grocery runs, medical visits, and essential errands require scheduling and foresight, as spontaneity is rarely feasible. Montana's historical settlement patterns compound these modern difficulties. The 19th century Homestead Act encouraged scattered farms across the plains, while mining and railroad booms created temporary camps that disappeared once resources were depleted. As a result, Montana developed isolated, dispersed communities rather than compact urban centers capable of supporting dense infrastructure. Today, Billings, the state's largest city, has just over 100,000 residents, while many towns are home to fewer than 2,000 people. This legacy of dispersed settlement continues to shape everyday life, limiting accessibility to services, impeding growth, and reinforcing the state's enduring challenges in retaining population. Living in Montana requires not only resilience, but also acceptance of delays, scarcity, and self-reliance in a world increasingly accustomed to instant access. Before moving on to reason number 1, remember to subscribe to the channel and give it a like to become a wise expert in American geography. 1. Historical legacy and the frozen economy. Why growth never came. Montana's present population distribution and economic landscape are deeply rooted in its historical development. The Homestead Act of 1862 allowed settlers to claim up to 160 acres of land, encouraging the establishment of scattered farms rather than concentrated urban centers. This policy shaped settlement patterns across the state, fostering isolation and reinforcing dependence on subsistence or small-scale commercial agriculture. The allure of mineral wealth led to waves of miners during gold, copper, and silver rushes, creating temporary towns that often vanished as soon as the veins were exhausted. While railroads were constructed to connect these emerging settlements with markets in Chicago, St. Louis, and beyond, many lines were later abandoned when highways or more profitable routes emerged. The result was a legacy of dispersed communities rather than the cohesive urban hubs that elsewhere drove economic growth and modernization. Modern economic centers never fully materialized in Montana. Unlike states that industrialized or developed technology corridors, Montana's development remained oriented toward ranching, small-scale resource extraction, and seasonal industries such as tourism. Today, this pattern persists. Billings, the state's largest city, houses roughly 110,000 residents, while other significant towns, Helena, Missoula, and Bozeman, have populations ranging between 30,000 and 75,000. By comparison with urban centers elsewhere in the United States, these numbers are minuscule, illustrating the enduring impact of early settlement patterns. Montana's economy remains largely rural and seasonal, with agriculture, livestock, and tourism dominating employment, leaving few pathways for residents seeking high-paying, year-round work in modern sectors such as finance, technology, or research. This historical and economic legacy shapes the daily lives of Montanans in profound ways. Residents benefit from unparalleled natural beauty, expansive landscapes, and the freedom afforded by wide open spaces, but these advantages come with substantial trade-offs. Sparse population density limits urban infrastructure and public services, from healthcare and education to transportation and digital connectivity. Social and economic isolation is common, particularly in smaller towns, where access to specialized medical care or professional opportunities often requires long-distance travel. For many residents, the romantic romantic idea of frontier living is tempered by the practical difficulties of everyday life. Living in Montana is an exercise in contrasts. The state offers breathtaking natural splendor, yet struggles with infrastructural scarcity. Extreme isolation coexists with the human desire for community, and a pioneering historical legacy meets the expectations of a modern economy that largely bypasses it. These factors collectively explain why, despite its vast size, natural wealth, and scenic value, Montana has consistently struggled to attract and retain a substantial population. What was once an asset during the state's settlement era, its expansive, resource-rich territory has, in the context of contemporary society, become a barrier. Montana's frozen economy and dispersed communities make sustaining growth difficult, ensuring that its population density remains among the lowest in the nation, even as its landscapes continue to captivate the imagination. High-skill sectors such as technology, finance, and research are disproportionately scarce, with only 3% of jobs in these areas compared to over 10% in California or New York. Young professionals, especially recent graduates, often migrate to urban centers like Denver or Seattle in search of better-paying positions, stimulating the Montana Exit Plan. This outflow exacerbates demographic imbalances, leaving rural areas with aging populations, fewer services, and reduced economic vitality. Seasonal employment further complicates sustainability. Many jobs, particularly in tourism and agriculture, are temporary. These industries are vulnerable to fluctuations in weather, commodity prices, and demand, making financial stability unpredictable. For lifelong residents, balancing income, expenses, and survival in extreme climates represents a continuous struggle. Even with natural beauty and outdoor amenities, economic limitations make long-term settlement challenging for those who require financial security, professional growth, and access to modern conveniences. Montana's natural environment, while breathtaking, is both a draw and a deterrent. The state's diverse geography includes the Rocky Mountains, plains, semi-arid regions, rivers, and lakes, offering exceptional opportunities for recreation and tourism. However, these same features present practical challenges. Grizzly bears, wolves, and other wildlife pose risks to livestock and humans. Seasonal droughts can devastate crops and ranching operations. Avalanches, floods, and severe winter storms disrupt transportation and endanger communities. Public lands, comprising over 40% of the state, limit urban and commercial expansion. While ideal for recreation, these lands are unsuitable for large-scale settlement or infrastructure development. The physical environment necessitates specialized equipment, preparedness strategies, and continuous vigilance. Daily life in Montana is as much about navigating environmental hazards as it is about enjoying scenic beauty. Residents must account for weather extremes, long travel distances, and occasional natural disasters as integral parts of living in this vast state. Montana presents a striking paradox. Its natural beauty, vast open spaces, and sense of freedom attract admiration worldwide. Yet its extreme climate, sparse population, infrastructure gaps, economic limitations, high living costs, demographic imbalances, environmental hazards, and social isolation create formidable obstacles to permanent settlement. The state's history, shaped by homesteading, mining, and dispersed settlement, further entrenches these patterns, leaving Montana aesthetically magnificent but demographically fragile. For residents, living here is a balance of admiration and endurance. The expansive landscapes inspire awe, yet every daily routine, from commuting and heating to shopping and healthcare, requires careful planning and adaptation. Montana remains a place where solitude is abundant, natural splendor is unmatched, but practical conveniences and economic opportunities are scarce. The paradox is clear. The state's size, beauty, and history that might have promised growth instead reinforce scarcity and isolation. Montana continues to captivate the imagination, but its combination of physical, economic, and social factors explains why so few people choose to stay permanently. For those seeking adventure, tranquility, or refuge from urban life, Montana remains alluring. For those seeking opportunity, connectivity, and accessibility, it remains a challenging frontier in the modern world. Now that you know the hidden truth about Montana, would you choose to live there? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments and see if you agree. However, what many of us would agree on is watching the video on screen, as we all like to have something to share and learn more about, and that's what this video will accomplish. But first, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit like. Otherwise, we may never see each other again.